network policy server. Okay, no problem. Yeah, you can quickly download it, Johnny. It's not difficult to download at all. I mean, you just Google TeamViewer download, and just download and install it. Then you can use that ID and that password to connect to it. So it's really easy and really straightforward to connect to. So if you need any help, let us know. We can try to help. Yeah, okay. So we're starting with network policy server. Let's go 22. So has anyone ever used network policy server before? Does anyone use network policy server in the environment?
No.
No? Does anyone currently use network policy server where you work?
No.
No.
No. No.
I know most people are saying no, but are you really sure that you don't use it? Does anyone currently use radio server where you work?
Well, the network guys, they use radio server.
Yeah. So yeah. So actually, network policy server, that's not the only thing it does. It's Microsoft's implementation of radio server. So that's what network policy server is. So the reason why it's called network policy server is because Microsoft has added a lot of other things apart from radios. So it does things like network access protection. It does other things apart from radios. But and just to put it basically, network policy server is Microsoft's implementation of radio server. So you realize what you said, like a lot of guys have used it before, but maybe just don't, not sure. Um, network policy server is Microsoft's implementation of Radius server. So that leads us to a good question. Um, what is Radius? So who wants to go first? Eric, who wants to go first? So what's Radius?
Shoot. It is.
Because if
Gosh,
network
I don't
policy
know.
server, yeah,
Wait,
no, yeah,
okay,
no problem. It's
endpoint.
absolutely no problem. That's why we're having the hangouts. So yeah, so network policy server is Microsoft implementation of Radius server. So what's Radius? I'm sure Sven should know because Sven was here. We did a lab together last week. So Sven, what is Radius server?
Oh, yeah. Well, radios is typically used when you got a lot of VPN servers, for example, and you don't want to configure all of them. So you got a central point of configuration for all your VPN servers, which are clients when you look at the radio side of things. But the clients of the radio server doesn't have to be VPN servers. Could also be access points, for example, or switches. Yeah.
VPN server. Okay, so we'll try to break that down a bit. So basically,
Yeah.
to understand radius, you have to understand the concept of centralized authentication. So for example, you have your VPN server on your network. So let's say this is your VPN server. Your VPN server, you have your users, your remote users connecting to this VPN server. So let's call this guy remote user 1. So remote user 1 connects to the VPN server. After it connects to the VPN server, the last time that we discussed VPN, we mentioned 3 stages of VPN connections. What are those 3 stages? Does anyone remember? 3 stages of VPN connections. What are those 3 stages?
Is it the triple A or something?
No, not that one. You three stages of VPN connection. Does anyone remember? That we said number one is the connection. In other words, if this guy wants to access the internal network, so let's say the internal network is here. And he wants to access it via the VPN server. So the first thing he will do is he will connect to the VPN server. So that's the connection stage. And the connection stage, we mentioned that it uses certain protocols. What are those protocols for the connection stage?
IPsec.
IPsec, nice one, excellent. What else? IPsec. Anyone want to? Yeah, good one.
Tunneling
Yeah,
protocol,
point-to-point
layer
tunneling
2
protocol.
tunneling
Good one.
protocol.
Yeah. And which other one? Actually, this one is also a question too. So once you understand
IP2.
VPN connections in three stages, number one stage is connection. Connection, there are different
SSTP.
protocols. Yeah, exactly. Good one. SSTP. And we explained this. I mean, the video is online if you need to watch that again. So we explained this that number one thing is connection, where you go through using these protocols to connect. PPTP, what that basically means is this guy wants to send traffic to the internal network. He takes the traffic, he encapsulates it, or in other words, he puts a new header on the traffic. And the new header will contain information directed to this VPN server, and it will be encrypted. So the VPN server receives it, takes away the new header, passes it to the internal network. So it's basically just encapsulating it. So we said the first stage is connection. And what's the second stage?
Authentication?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good one. Authentication is the second stage. And which protocols are used for authentication? PAP?
Yeah. Pub.
CHAP?
Sub v2.
Yep. MS CHAP. MS CHAP version 2. What else? This one, the next one is good
EAP.
one. This one is really important to what we're discussing today. EAP, and which one again?
PERP.
Good one, PEAP. So again, whatever you're doing with VPN connections, just break it down into three stages. Number one is connection. So number one, you check, does the user even have connection to the VPN server? Oh, they have connection. So if it's failing, it could be failing in any of these stages. It could be that connection is working, but authentication is failing. Then after authentication, what's the next thing?
The next thing should be authorization.
Yeah, authorization. So Taiwo is actually Taiwo is actually closing the AAA, but it's just a bit different. The difference is that this one is like so authorization. So these are the three stages of VPN connection. First of all, it tries to connect to the VPN server using certain protocols. Then number two, it tries to authenticate. So connection could be okay, but it fails in authentication. But authentication could be okay, then it fails in authorization. In other words, the user has authenticated. It's like, yeah, you're a valid user, but sorry, you are not authorized to access the network. Even though you are a valid user, you're not authorized. So it could fail in any of these stages, either connection, authentication, and authorization. And okay, so what brought us to this one is, okay, so you have the remote user connecting to this. So what you do is on your VPN server, you go and configure a profile. And the profile will be something like this. For connection, use PPTP. For authentication, use MSCHAP. Yeah. For authorization, you configure a profile and you say if the user is not in X group, deny access. So basically, you go to your VPN server and you configure all these policies on your VPN server.
I got a question on this point.
Yes, please.
Can I use everything every authentication method with every start of connection?
So
Or are they, yeah, is it not possible?
yeah, so actually by default, it will actually try to use everything because this one, number one, you can set it manually or you can leave it to negotiate. So if you leave it to negotiate, the VPN server and the VPN client will communicate and say, do you support this protocol? If you support this protocol, that's what we use. So they start from PEEP. That's where they start from. Then they go to that. Then they go to MS Chap version 2. You get the point? So they start from
Mm.
the most secure, then they keep trying to negotiate down. So if you support PEEP, yeah, we'll use PEEP. If you support
Okay,
MS Chap, if you don't support that, but you
okay.
support MS Chap, we use that. So they keep
But
negotiating all the way down. Carry on,
uh
sorry.
so I can use MS Chap, for example, with SSTP, L2TP, like version 2, with every connection type,
Good
or
question. There are some of the connection protocols that only allow you to use specific authentication protocols. Just some. Not all of them, some. For example, if you're going to use L2TP, you can only use PEEP or EEP. You get the point?
yeah.
So there are some of them that will allow you to use anyone. There are some that
Mm.
will that because of the way the protocol works, you have to use a particular authentication method.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Is
Okay.
that clear, guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Taiwo, is that clear?
No, I'm not read, but I'll still go back and read it. I
What?
didn't read before coming here, so excuse my
No, not at all, not at
ignorance.
all. No, it's not. It's not. I mean, the main thing is, let's see. I mean, one of the main thing is this. One of the main thing to understand is, um, just try to understand like those things that we mentioned.
The concept. Yeah.
Yeah, that those three steps. This one, this one, this one. But again, it will become clearer as we go on. So it tries to negotiate all that. So again, remote user wants to connect to the VPN server. What does it do? It tries to connect first. Then after that, it tries to authenticate. Then after that, it's like, am I authorized? Now, all these things, you configure them on the VPN server. So actually, let's go to because it's not difficult to do at all. Let's go to our VPN server. Again, this is the setup that we're using for today. So let me just quickly
Okay.
make some. Oh. Okay.
Um, can you just switch to the setup again?
Yeah, I'll switch to the setup
Just
now.
for a second.
Yeah, I will.
Just for 1 second.
So let's go. Let me just quickly, sorry, copy this one. Let's go.
Okay.
Continue. Yeah, sorry. I'll just
Yeah.
quickly so that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, it looks like Cisco.
Yeah, it is. It is. But there's a reason. The reason
Okay.
is because it's easier when you see the setup in a
Okay.
diagram like this than
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
just looking at everything in VirtualBox. You're like, where is this guy
Yeah.
connecting to? You have no
Yeah.
idea. But when you see
Yeah.
everything in like a diagram like this, you're like, now I
Okay.
understand. So basically, all these guys are
Okay.
on the same network. So these
Okay.
are
I
the client.
just took a screenshot, so
Yeah, nice
now
one.
everything is clear.
So these are the client. Launch server 2. So let me just write it down. Launch server 2 um, is a VPN server.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So we'll come to that. So launch server 2 is our VPN server. So you see the one that we have as switch 2 here. So actually, let's change the symbol to so that it won't be confusing. So switch 2 is actually our internet connection.
Mhm.
So the VPN server, remember, it's connected to the internal network and to the external network, right? So that's why we have it connected here and we have it connected to
Okay.
the internet because that's what your
Okay.
VPN connection will be in the real world. So let's
But
go
shouldn't
to
we switch to a router when this is a connection to the internet? Not?
yeah. So this one you can actually ignore this one because we won't learn networking.
Just
So yeah,
okay, okay. Just the Ethernet one interface is configured with an external IP address, or this is just
yes,
the way to the internet, so to say.
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the main thing to know is that your VPN server has two network adapters. One of them is connected to your internal network. One of them is connected to your external network. So what will happen is, let's say this guy goes from inside the network, maybe it's a laptop, goes to the outside the network, connects to the internet. That's what I want to stimulate. That this guy can access, our internal resources from the internet. You get the point? So that's why we're using a diagram like this to make it clear, not to make it confusing. So in other words, if we're just doing it in VirtualBox, it's not clear. Where is this one connected to? Where is this one
Yeah.
connecting to? But then when you see everything like in a diagram like this, you understand what is actually going on. Okay. Yeah. So let's go. So actually, let's go back. Let's go to our VPN server and let's do a quick configuration. I mean, it doesn't take long to configure VPN at all. It's really, really easy, really, really simple. Yeah, because I snapshot snapshot my domain controller. Yeah, no problems. We'll just do it again. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So what we'll just do is we just remove it from the network, connect it back to the network.
Yeah. The domain controller has forgotten
Yeah.
that it has
So
a machine account.
yeah,
Lot.
I I had like old snapshot that I restored.
Mm.
So it's one of the reasons why they say use snapshots for domain controller. Okay, so we'll just quickly configure our VPN server. And what we're going to be doing on our VPN server, it's really simple. What you see that we're going to be doing is we go to our VPN server, we'll configure the connection, we'll configure the authentication, we'll configure the authorization. So you wonder, so where does NPS come in into all of this? This is where NPS comes in. So now imagine a situation where, which is not rare for many organizations, you have another VPN server here. One of the reasons could be, in case this one fails, your user can still connect to the internal network using this other VPN server, right? Another scenario could be, so let's call this VPN server 2. Another scenario could be you are a multi-site organization. You have a site in India, you have another site in US. So you have a VPN server in India, a VPN server in US. So that guys that are connecting from Asia region can connect to the Indian VPN server. Guys that are connecting from the North American region can connect using the North American VPN server. So you can have a situation like that. But what this means as an administrator is you have to go to this VPN server and configure the same thing and configure a VPN profile and say, I want you to use connection protocol, PPTP. I want you to use authentication, this one. I want you to use authorization, this policy. Now, imagine a situation when you now have multiple VPN servers everywhere. And you have to be going to every one of them and saying, this is your connection protocol, this is your authentication protocol, this is your authorization profile. Then if someone decides in the organization, okay, we want to be more secure, we're not using MS Sharp authentication anymore. We want to start using a more secure authentication. Now you have to go around 15 VPN servers and say, well, now we are changing this policy. That is where network policy server comes in. It's a way to centrally define authentication for your network. It's a central authentication technology. What does that mean? Does anyone want to explain what does that mean? Central authentication. Who wants to go? Let's go with Taiwo first.
I mean, any change, any change that you make on a server,
Mhm.
it's distributed to the other ones.
Well, you're close. Not exactly like the change is distributed. So what about Eric? What do you think?
Well, I don't really know, but I'm going to make a guess that
Yep.
it's like a proxy almost where it forwards to a central location.
Exactly, that's what it does. So you have all you have to do is install your network policy server here. And on this network policy server, you say, okay, for connection, this is what I want. For authentication, this is what I want. For authorization, this is what I want. And you now go to all these guys, this guy, let's call him MPS1. Now go to all these guys and says, hey, don't bother with VPN profiles. If you need anything, just go speak to MPS1. MPS1 will do the authentication for you. So you talk to this guy also and just configure this guy and say, I just want you, like you said, just a proxy. I just want you, if anything comes in, just forward it to MPS1. MPS1 will take care of the authentication and authorization. You get the point? So
Yeah.
that way, if this guy comes here and this guy goes, hey, I want to connect to this internal network, this guy will go, yeah, I'm not sure if your credentials are valid or not because nothing is configured on me like that. But what I can do, I'll forward this to this central server, which will authenticate you, tell me if you are allowed or not, and based on his response, I will either allow you in or not allow you in. So in other words, you have one central server that is doing authentication and authorization, just one. Or you can have multiple as a group if you want load balancing and stuff like that. But you get the point. So the key concept to understand when we're talking about radio server or MPS server is centralized authentication. That's the main thing to understand is that we're talking about centralized authentication. As an admin, you don't want multiple silos, multiple authentication silos on your network. What we mean by that is you have a machine here, another server here, another server here, another server here. Now you have to configure the users individually on each server. So you go here and say, well, user 1 is allow access. Oh, well, this one, user 2 is allow access. Well, this one, user 3 is allowed access. Then you have to start updating everything individually. What you want is you want a single solution, a single server that is centrally authenticating your users, right? That's what we want. We don't want multiple user database, a different user database here, a different user database here, a different user database here. You want a central user database where users can go to, they are authenticated, and everything is working fine. Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
So the other thing is this. Here's the other thing is that the good thing about MPS, the reason why Microsoft is not calling it just, Radius server, is because it does more than Radius. But again, remember, it is Microsoft implementation of Radius server. Is that MPS does not only work for VPN servers. So you have VPN server here. MPS does more than that. Like Sven mentioned, MPS can work for wireless access points. For wireless access points, for even your Cisco or your network switches. So in other words, you have a user here. This user wants to connect to this wireless access point. This user connects. So one thing you can do is you can go to the access point and say when the user connects, I want you to ask the user for their username and password, and then configure on the access point and say if the user's username is user1 and the password is user1pass, I want you to allow him in. So you can do that, and if you have 10 access points, you have to do this on all of them. Or you can say to the access point, hey, I want you to go talk to this guy here. So this guy here is MPS1. So on MPS1, you have all your users. User1, user1 pass, user2, user2 pass. You have all your users on MPS here. So let's just, um, so you have all your users here on this guy. So multiple users, you have user 3, you get the point, user 4, user 5, user 6.
Yeah.
So all your users are on this guy. So the
This would
access,
be
carry
this
on.
would be normally your Active Directory database, right?
Yes.
So,
So yeah, so we'll bring that in also very soon.
mm,
So you have
mm,
this one here, and this one is your MPS server. So what will happen is rather than you going on the access point one and saying if a user tries to connect to you, you know, if their username is this one and their password is this one, allow them in. You can just say to this MPS server, pass it to this guy, sorry, to this wireless access point, pass it to this guy. So if this guy tries to connect, the MPS, the wireless access point will go, I'm not authenticating anything, my job is just to give you access to the network or not, but I'm not going to be doing the authentication. I'll pass it to this guy. This guy will look in his database, tell me if you are authenticated, look in its authorization profile and tell me if you are authorized, send the response to me, and based on that, I will allow you in or block you. So basically, I won't be doing authentication authorization. I'll be passing it to this guy. This guy will be doing it, replying to me, and then I will allow you through. Same thing for this switch. Same thing for the VPN server. VPN server will go, a remote user is trying to connect. I won't be authenticating and authorizing. I will pass it to this guy. This guy will tell me whether you're authenticated, whether you're allowed or not. Then based on that, it will reply to me, and then I will allow you in or not allow you in. Is that clear?
Yep.
Yeah. So let's take another side to this, which is the side that Sven brought up now. And the other side is this one. So let's minimize this. So the other side is actually this database is not even sitting. This database is not even sitting on the MPS server. This database is sitting on your Active Directory server. So once you install MPS in your organization and this MPS server is joined to the domain, it's actually just using Active Directory. So you don't have to have a separate user database. It just links up with Active Directory. Active Directory authenticates your user, passes it back to MPS. MPS does the authorization. MPS passes it back to the access points, the VPN server, the network switches, and then those one will decide whether you have connection or not. Is that confusing or is that clear?
Could you compare it to your diagram that you showed us earlier?
Oh, okay. You mean this architecture?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So look. So this is the domain controller, right?
yeah. The Active Directory
Yeah.
database would be there.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm thinking of a way to draw a diagram. No, just want to draw. No, that's just a text box. Okay. No, it's not a text box. Yeah, I can use this one. Yeah, nice one. Okay. So this guy wants to connect to the VPN server. So let's try to make it more real world. So this guy is connected to the internet, right? Your VPN server is connected to the internet. On the internet, when we discussed DNS, we talked about this. You have an external DNS server hosted with GoDaddy or someone. So let's say this one is pointing to vpn.adatum.com, and that is pointing to, let's say, 89.1.1.1, and the interface on this guy is 89.1.1.1, and this DNS address is on the internet on an internet DNS server. So this guy goes, I want to connect to vpn.adatum.com. So it goes to the internet, it goes all the way to your VPN server here. So this one receives it. This one is like, I've got no database hosted on me to be authenticating and authorizing users. So what I'll do is what you've sent to me, I'll act like a proxy. I'll forward it to, in this case, let's say LON server 2 is the VPN server, right? Let's say LON server 1 is the MPS server. In other words, the radio server. And LON DC1 is the AD domain controller, the Active Directory domain controller. So this thing will come here. So what do you think, Eric? What will LON server 2 do when the user's credentials come to LON server 2? What will it do?
Yeah, it's gonna proxy to, and it's gonna query the NPS server.
Good
It's gonna
one.
proxy to the NPS server,
So it will go to
and
the
then
MPS server here. So what will this one now do?
it's gonna reference the Active Directory database
Good one.
on
This one will
PC1.
go to Active Directory database. This one will now say, hey, whether this one says, hey, the user is actually a valid user. So this one will send the response back to this guy. So what will this guy now do?
It's gonna forward it back to server 2,
Yes,
say successful
exactly.
authentication.
But again, remember, Active Directory, so you've missed the point here. Active Directory goes, you are authenticated. So that's just authentication, not authorization. Authentication is you're a valid user. It doesn't mean that you're allowed to do anything.
Okay.
So authentication means, yeah, your username and password is correct, but it doesn't mean you're allowed to do anything. So authorization is a profile that you have to set up on, um, yeah, I just missed. Yeah, authorization is a profile that you have to set up on the MPS server. And the profile will go something like this. If a user is a member of this Active Directory group, allow them to have unlimited VPN access. If a user is not a member of this Active Directory group, don't allow them to have Active Directory access. Even though they're a valid user, you're not authorizing them to have access. You get the point? So Active Directory can do the authentication and say, yeah, it's a valid user and pass it back to this guy. So this guy will now look in his authorization profile and say, yeah, you're a valid user. Now, are you allowed to connect? Are you authorized to connect or not? So based on that, it now sends a response back to this guy and says, this user is not only a valid user, the authorization profile has said it can connect. So this guy now says to this guy, now you can connect to the internal network. Is that clear?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's basically what's going on. So this guy comes here, goes all the way here. This guy sends it to this guy. This guy is like, yeah, I'll pass it to you for authentication. You pass it back to me after authentication. I'll do the authorization. After doing the authorization, I'm not sure. After you do the authorization, I'll take it. After I do the authorization, I'll take it and pass it back. And based on that, that will happen.
So the authorization is like, okay, you are a user and you got, I don't know, uh, point-to-point tunneling. You are using the point-to-point tunneling protocol, and now you are allowed to connect to a file server and to Active Directory,
Yeah,
for example.
yeah. So
And then
actually,
on this is a sort of authorization that the radio server
yeah.
does, and then the file server again would do some other sort of authorization, like okay, you are allowed, right?
Ah, sorry, I didn't catch the last part. My internet dropped off. If you repeat the last
Mm,
part again.
okay, then when the client is allowed to connect to the file server would again do some sort of authorization. Like, okay, you are allowed to access this share and you are allowed to access this folder,
Ah,
for
so
example.
that one is part of like the topic that I'll be discussing next week. Because all those ones, so once the user is authenticated, all those ones come under like the type of like the protocols themselves. So in Active Directory, the default authentication protocol that Active Directory uses Kerberos. And
Mm.
Kerberos works with issuing tickets. A Kerberos ticket is issued to the user. So basically, the user uses that to connect to internal resources. So the user receives a ticket and is able to connect to internal resources. But but it's not only Kerberos. There's also NTLM and other protocols that the user can use.
Okay, I just want to say that the that the authorization is made on can be made on several spots in the network, right?
Yes.
It can be made on the radio server, but this can just be the first step because there could be a file server, and the file server does also does some sort of
Yeah.
authorization, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the fact that you allow so the The authorization that the VPN server does is, are you authorized to connect or not? But then it's left to the file server to say, okay, you've connected.
Yeah.
Are you authorized to access this file or not? You know, and so they all do
Yeah.
like their own different. You're right, their own different authorizations and stuff like that. But what I want to show when this one comes back on is to show that actually like configuring all these things is like really, really simple, really, really straightforward. The main thing with people is like in terms of understanding exactly how it works. That's like where I've seen people have issues with this. So if we go back to this guy and log into this guy and then join him back to the domain, install MPS on him, and then we'll be good. So yeah, so we'll join him back to the okay, yeah. So that's like the point of that. So the other thing with MPS is this. The other thing with not this one, let's use this one. So the other thing with MPS is this is we can only use MPS to do authentication and authorization. We can even use MPS as a proxy. In other words, what we can do is have one MPS server here. So this guy pass it to this MPS server. But this MPS server won't be doing authentication and authorization. It will actually just be a proxy to other MPS servers. So these guys will forward their authentication and authorization request to this guy. This guy will not actually do anything. This guy will just take the authentication and authorization and act like an MPS proxy and forward it to this guy.
Is this a radius proxy
Yes. So
function?
yeah, radius proxy sort of. But in what situation will you want to use something like this? What do you think?
I would use it, for example, in your diagram, the top NPS server is part of one forest, and the other NPS server is
I'm not
part
sure.
of
Your
another
voice is low
forest.
again. I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Ah, better now.
I would use it if the upper NPS server is part of one forest and the other NPS server is part of another forest,
Good one.
and I just want to let my users connect to one spot,
Yeah.
and then the relay, radius, is it Kerberos or
Mm.
Kerberos proxy would decide which NPS server to take for the traffic.
Yeah. Good one. I'm not sure. Is that clear at all? Johnny and Eric. No problem, Taiwo. Is that clear at all? In terms of why would you want to use something like this?
This
Because if you think about it, I think what Ven is saying, if I get it correctly, is this. Let's say you're like a sort of like a service provider and you're providing like services to different domains, different forests. You don't have access to their users, you don't have access to, their internal network and stuff like that. So what you can do is you can have an MPS proxy, and it's going to be something like this. So let's go and forgive my diagrams here. So this is a different domain. Let's say this is domain 1 and this is domain 2. And I'm a service provider, providing services to multiple domains, multiple customers and stuff like that. So what I can do is this guy will not actually be doing the authentication and authorization, but I can have a rule on this guy. And the rule will say if the domain name equals to domain 1, send it to this MPS server. If the domain name equals to domain 2, send it to this MPS server. If the domain name, and this one will send it to the internal Active Directory, you get the point. Because I'm not managing the customer's Active Directory, they're managing it themselves, but I'm providing a service to them that needs authentication of their users. So I can have a MPS proxy, which will actually be doing the authentication, but it will be forwarding it to other MPS servers to do the authentication. You get the point? Yeah. So that's like one reason why you can have something like this. Yep. Okay. So let's see if this one is back now. loan server 2. And let's just quickly join it back to our domain, and then we can go forward. So come on, come on. Adatum.com. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, good. We're done. So this is our VPN server, and this is what we'll be using for the practice that I'll be doing. Really simple, really straightforward to configure. But it's the understanding that shakes people. That
Hey David, do you have a video on your lab configuration?
On which one?
Like just on your overall lab, like how your lab's set up, you have SSDs, you keep your VHDs separated on different disks as opposed to your OS drive, like do you have a video of your overall lab config?
No, not at all. Not at all. But like my lab is like if you can see my screen now, if I go to my team viewer, I've got multiple servers that I use. So I've got this Dell server, which is this computer that I'm on. I've got
Like
this
physical box?
physical box, yeah, physical box. So actually, if I let's see, you can see my face, right?
Yeah.
So if I stand up a bit, okay, this is not long enough. The camera is not long enough, so it's just making noise right next to me here. So it's a physical box. So this is another Dell server. This one. Um, this one is my home laptop. This is another Dell server. So there are three Dell servers. This one is something different. It's for a customer somewhere. And this one is the one that I use for my MCSE labs. So I've loaded the Microsoft labs. You know, the one we're doing last week as Ven. So I've loaded them on
Yeah.
this machine here. So actually, if I double click on this machine, it's been a while since I logged into it because it's been a while since I used it. You can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a, let me see if I can still remember the password. It's been a long time since I used it. Uh-oh.
So this is an Hyper-V server? Ah, yeah,
Yeah. So you
it
can
is.
see. So remember all the labs that we're doing last week? So
Yeah,
I've loaded them physically on this box. So that you've
okay.
got like all
Mhm.
these servers I can actually start up, you know, and
Okay.
and do the labs and stuff like that.
And do you got the hardwares in your home or in your company or somewhere else?
So in my in my home,
So, yeah.
in my home, but I don't leave them switched on all the time. Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't. Actually, there's
Okay.
another one
Then
that is there's even another one that is actually off. Apart from all those ones, there's another one that is actually just sitting right next to me also. That is
okay. And
off
are
at the moment.
these rack mounted servers or
Some are rack mounted, some are just tower servers,
ah
and some are
okay.
actually just desktop PCs, but are powerful desktop PCs.
Yeah,
Like the
because
one next to
because
me. Yeah,
uh,
carry on.
yeah, because some of them make a lot of noise, right?
Yeah, they do.
So
Servers do. So
yeah.
those ones I usually switch them off,
Mm.
but I can switch them on remotely because they've
Uh,
got iDRAC. But then I've got the desktop, which are powerful. Like the desktop sitting next to me has 32 gig of RAM, has power like let's see how many cores. That's 12 cores on it. Two processors that are 6 cores each. But it's a desktop, but it's just a powerful desktop, so it doesn't make as much noise and
mm.
all that stuff. So that's like
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, but then the other thing is that I'm enjoying in the labs recently is I like, and I'm not trying to make things complicated because I like making things simple. Is I like using GNS3, which is the one that I'm using for the labs rather than the Microsoft one. So I like
Mm.
using this one because with this one, I mean, the scenario is endless. I can simulate a multi-site network and have, like I can have London servers here, Birmingham servers here, connect them to the internet. which is like a multi-site, I can do lots of stuff and do multi, just do, lots of scenarios. I can also do them with VirtualBox or VMware Workstation, but this one just makes it, a bit more clearer. They are with real network devices. These are real Cisco switches, real Cisco routers, that you can configure. You get the point. So it just
Mm.
makes for like a more wide range that I can practice with.
Mm.
Yeah,
Cool.
no
Sorry,
problem.
sorry to take it off track. I was just curious about the lab.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So yeah, so let's go back to LAN server 2, which is our VPN server. So for our VPN server, first of all, we have to make sure that we have the role routing and remote access installed. So if we have routing and remote access installed, the next thing will be to configure our VPN server, which is actually routing and remote access here. So you see how simple and how easy it is to configure the VPN server. So what I'll do is I'll disable this. So if I disable it, that will remove all the current configuration that is on it. So all the configuration will go away. Then I'll re-enable it, and that will put all the configure, and then I'll need to reconfigure it from scratch. But it's really, the whole point is to show how easy and straightforward it is to configure this. So let's go. Routing, yeah, come on. Come on, we'll get them. Come on. Mm. So this will be disabled, and then we can move on from there. So let me just make sure. Let me just check what is installed on this. Again, remember um, that the role that you need is routing and remote access for a VPN server, which is this one. So for MPS server, it's network policy and access services. That's for the MPS server or the radio server, which we'll talk about in more details. But for remote access, that's the one that you need. Okay, yeah. So all the configuration is done. It's gone away. So what I want to do is um, let's configure and enable this one. And then we'll see how easy it is to configure a VPN server. So the first thing is asking us, do you want to configure just VPN services, NAT services, VPN and NAT, secure connection between two private network, which is like more of like an site-to-site VPN and custom configuration, but we just use remote access. That's what we want for now. We just want a VPN server. We don't want a dial-up server. So you see how simple it is to configure. So select the network interface that connects to the internet. So which is this one, 98.1.1.2. So that's the one connecting to the internet. Okay. So we'll select that and say, it says, does it want to enable security settings? So for now, we'll disable this because what this one will do is that it actually puts firewall entries that will block all traffic on this interface apart from VPN traffic. So in other words, this interface of this server, the only traffic that can come into it will be VPN traffic. Every other traffic will be blocked. So if we have this option selected, it will actually go and create firewall rules to block every other traffic apart from VPN traffic. But we don't want that for now. So you see, it says static packet filters allow only VPN traffic to gain access to this server through the selected interface. And this is a good idea in production, you know, but we'll disable that for now. Then it's saying which one is connected to your internal network, you know, which one is connected to your internal network. And the one that's connected to our internal network, I'm not sure, somebody got disconnected. I think maybe Eric got disconnected. Eric, are you still there? No, I think Eric got disconnected. Yeah. So the one that's connected to our internal network is this one, the corporate network one, and we'll go next. Um, we want to assign IP address automatically. No, no, not automatically. We want the DHCP server to assign it. and let's say 192.168.70.110, and let's just say 21 addresses here, 110 to 130. Then next, um, now it says, do you want to set up this server to work with a radio server, or do you want this one to be the one authenticating? So in this case, because we're not using radio server now, we say we want this VPN server to be the one authenticating users. And just by selecting this one, it will actually, by selecting that option, it will actually.
Okay. And what's your strategy? Are you doing lab or reading a book or?
A little bit of everything. So the way CBT nuggets primarily,
Yeah.
and then I do the prometric test questions, and then I go through that without referencing any material, and then I go back and I read all the questions that I got wrong. So I read all the material for all the questions I got wrong, and then I go back and I redo the test from the beginning, and I just keep doing that until I get less and less questions wrong.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good one.
And then these are good. What I found for the Hangouts is that it's good to help me wrap my head around the concept of the technologies, like a much broader, high-level overview instead of focusing on the really granular material.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome
Sorry
back,
guys,
Hi,
I
David.
hi,
think
David.
my
Welcome back.
my internet connection again, and I was
Yeah.
talking for minutes. I didn't realize that it already gone. I was because I was just going and going and going. I was like, hold on. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I
So
think
it's
so.
always important to ask us some questions because
Yeah, I think
otherwise
so.
you don't know
Yes,
that you're
because
disconnected.
normally I'll ask questions, but the thing with MPS is, for example, Eric already mentioned at the beginning that he's not that much familiar with MPS. And it's the same way, like MPS is just one of those topics that people are not that much familiar with because not many people use it. And then to add to it, it's a bit more. It's not complicated, but it's a bit more. It could be confusing. MPS is one of those topics that when we used to talk about it's easy to make IT confusing because we have so many things that we can keep saying and nobody's explaining. And in MPS you have things like SHV and SHA and NAP and MPS and PAP and CHAP and MS CHAP and EAP and peep, and eventually you're like, hold on, you're just throwing all these terms, and they're like, SOH, SOHR, SSOH, SSOHR. You're getting like all these bombardments of all this stuff, and you're like, hold on, hold on, hold on. What's like the meaning of all this stuff that's going on? So it could be like one of those tricky technologies. So that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I'm asking like less question. I'm like,
Yeah. It's an acronym soup. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, for example, now, yeah, and then, I mean, and that's like what's like full in Microsoft documentation. You have SHV, SHA, NAB. Not only that, you have HRA, HPS, HR. You've got like all this stuff, and this one is talking to this one, then goes back to talk to this other one, and this one comes back to talk to this other one, and then it talks this one to this other one, and it's like one of those
Uh,
ones that
that's right.
it's not
The
straightforward.
TechNet can be really confusing. So
Yeah,
sometimes it's a really good source,
yeah.
but sometimes it's really, really confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
and yeah, so that's one of the reasons why. So, um, I'm not sure. I think someone lost access to the server. I'm not sure if that's Eric or Johnny.
Oh yeah, that was me. I'll
Yeah,
rejoin.
yeah. So someone, yeah. If you do you need the code again?
No, I have it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now it's asking us. It's saying which interface is connected to our internal network. We've selected it. Um, then the next thing that it's saying is that, um, it says now look at this. This is like the place where Radius begins to come in. It says, although routing and remote access can authenticate connection requests, in other words, your VPN server can authenticate connection requests. It says large networks that include multiple remote access server often use a radius server for central authentication. If you're using a radius server on your network, you can set this server to forward authentication requests to the radius server. So in other words, it's saying, yes, you can use the radius server to do authentication, but if you have multiple VPN servers in your environment, you probably want to use a radius server. But just for demonstration's sake, we'll say, no, we don't want to use a radius server. We want to use this VPN server for what we're doing. So we go next, and then we click finish. So let's see what it does. So it's going to create all that for us. And then we have our VPN server. Yeah, so here's our VPN server now. And this VPN server now will be the one doing authentication. So if you go under properties, and if you go under security, you can see this VPN server is doing the authentication itself. So this is the authentication part of it. This VPN server is the one doing the authentication itself. So if I close this and right click ports and go to properties, actually I'm not sure, like if I go to properties here, and here you can see all the different connection protocols that we can use. We can use PPP, IK version 2, which is IPsec. So if we want, we can go, disable it, remove that one, and that disables it. So it's saying I can use all these connection protocols. I can use IK version 2, SSTP. If I don't want to use SSTP, I can disable this and click OK. Used by none. So it's not going to use SSTP. If I'm like, I don't want to use PPTP, I can go and disable it, and go OK, and it's not going to use PPTP. So I can basically select which connection protocols I want to use on the VPN server. In this case, we'll just leave everything. And one thing to remember is that when configuring VPN, the values has to be the same on the client and on the server. They both have to agree. In other words, if the server is like, I'm using PPTP for connection, the client also has to agree I'm using PPTP for connection. If the server is configured to use SSTP and the client is configured to use PPTP, there won't be any connection. So this is the connection phase of VPN connections. Then we have the authentication phase, which we'll find here, properties. So authentication can either be done on this server by itself, which is Windows authentication, or we can select radius authentication, in which case we have to select a radius server that we will use. You get the point? So we can say, VPN server, we want you to do the authentication by yourself. In other words, go talk to Active Directory by yourself. Or we don't want you to talk to Active Directory. We want you to go pass this to a radius server and let the radius server do all the authentication. And then we can do configure and select the radius server that we want it to go talk to. And we can select, multiple radius server that this guy will go and talk to for authentication.
So would this also be the place you set up the proxy, if there was a proxy radius server?
Yeah, so this, again, remember, this is currently on the VPN server, right?
Okay.
So we're currently on the VPN server. So are you referring to using the VPN server as a proxy to radius, or using a radius as proxy to another radius? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the later.
Yeah, if you're talking about using radius as proxy to another radius, that one, we'll get to that one later. So that one is when we'll come to this server. But this one is currently the VPN server. So again, remember we said there are three phases, right? There's connection, right? And we mentioned the protocols that you can use in connection, which are this one. So here is where you can configure your connection protocols. You can disable them from here. If I untick this, I've disabled it and click OK, it's gone. It's not used. No one can connect to this VPN server using L2TP. If you have a VPN client that only supports L2TP, sorry, you can't connect. You get the point. So both server and client must support the same protocol for them to connect to each other. So but I want everything to be enabled, so I'll just go and enable this one again. So this is the connection phase of things. After connection, we have authentication. Authentication is under here, which is what we'll see under security here. So we can either select this VPN server to do the authentication itself, or we can say to this VPN server, go talk to a radio server to do the authentication. So that's the authentication bit of this. So in this case, we just leave the VPN server to do its own authentication. But that's not all. We have something else that we need to look at. What's the last thing that we need to look at? So we've checked.
I think the radio server and the VPN server also have to authenticate to each other, right?
Yeah, but again, remember that we're not even doing that yet. We're just doing just single VPN server that is not using radios at all.
Without radios.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have to look into Active Directory, because when we use a user, we have to look if he is allowed to remote dial in or not.
Yeah, I mean that's also part of it, but that's like all tied in. So again, remember when you're talking about VPN, you go in 3 stages: connection, right? Authentication, authorization. We've showed where you configure the connection here. So if you want to configure the connection, it's not difficult. Go under ports, go under properties, configure which connection you want to use, which connection protocol you want to use. After the VPN client connects, the VPN client will need to be authenticated. So we can go under properties and we can either configure the VPN server to do the authentication itself, or we want the VPN server to go talk to a radio server, in which case we do the thing that you mentioned. We have to configure a key between the VPN server and the radio server to connect. But this time around, we just want the VPN server to do the authentication itself. And we can select the authentication method that we want to use. So we can use HEAP. So when we talk about HEAP, what are we referring to? Extensible Authentication Protocol. What are we referring to? How does HEAP work? So when we say authentication method, in other words, you get the connection, then after that you have authentication. There are different authentication methods that you can use. You can either use this on authenticated access. In other words, a user can connect without having to do any authentication. But of course, we don't want to use this. We can use PAP, which simply means password authentication. So the VPN client connects to the server, whether PPTP, SSTP. The server hacks and says, hey, I need your password. The user provides his password, and the server goes, yes, you are allowed to connect. But the issue with PAP is that PAP is sent in plain text, right? So the password is sent over the internet in plain text. It's not encrypted, it doesn't care. So that's why Microsoft has intentionally put unencrypted password in front of this one. So they're saying you can use just a password, but it's unencrypted. So you can use PAP if you want, or if you want, you can use CHAP, which is encrypted authentication. So it will ask for a password, but it encrypts it. So CHAP actually doesn't send the password over the internet. It uses a different method. And we talked about that in our VPN lesson about how CHAP works. So CHAP doesn't send the password over the internet, but it's encrypted authentication. So you have MS CHAP, which is Microsoft's implementation of CHAP. So that is Microsoft is the MS and CHAP. So Microsoft have their own implementation of CHAP. And then we have this one here called Extensible Authentication Protocol. So how does Extensible Authentication Protocol, how does it work?
I think that MS v2 and EAP work somehow together, and when you, I think the EAP is used to build some sort of security for the MS v2 tunnel. So first of all, the EAP will do some sort of authentication and build a tunnel, and in this tunnel, the MS v2 authentication is taking place.
So actually, not really. So this is the way. So let's go slowly. So let's go slowly. So this is how EAP works. There are 2 types of EAP. There's just EAP and there's PEAP. Whenever you hear EAP, the thing that should come to your mind, whenever you hear the word EAP, here's the thing that should come to your mind. Certificate.
Okay.
Out of all those protocols that are out of all those authentication protocols that are listed, the only one that uses certificate for authentication is EAP and PEAP. So EAP is Extensible Authentication Protocol. PEAP is Protected Extensible Authentication Protocol, which is just, double encryption EAP. So when you hear EAP, think certificates. There are different modes of EAP. You have EAP TLS. Now let's just go slowly. And we have EAP MS CHAP version 2. So that's why it's extensible, because you can use it with other authentication protocols. So you have EAP TLS. How does EAP TLS work? It's simple. The server has a certificate.
Yeah.
The client, so this is the good part about it, also has a certificate. The client uses the server certificate to authenticate the server. The client uses the server certificate to authenticate the server. The server uses the client certificate to authenticate the client, right?
Okay.
EAP MS Chat version 2 is a bit different because, again, remember that when we talk about MS Chat version 2, we're still talking password. So again, but here's the thing, because with EAP we're talking certificate. So server has a certificate.
Oh, zie je dit?
Yep. Server has a certificate. Client doesn't need a certificate. So the server, the client uses the server certificate to authenticate the server, whereas the client uses the server certificate to authenticate the server, but the server, but the client, but the server uses the client username and password to authenticate the server. It doesn't use the client certificate. So that's the difference between the two. This one, you need both the server and the client to have their certificate, because everything from beginning to end is based on certificate authentication. Whereas this one, the server authentication will be done with certificate, but the client authentication, it doesn't need a certificate.
Okay.
So that's
I think
carry on.
what I thought. I think I was thinking about was EAP MS Chap v2, because the guy in the CMT Nuggets explains EAP MS Chap v2. It's like you need username and password, right?
Yes.
But the MS Chap v2 channel is not secure anymore, because you can use Cloud Cracker or stuff like that. And to secure this sort of communication, you can use EIP and use certificates to secure this
so that is when you don't use MS Chat version 2 anymore. You don't use EAP MS Chat version 2, you now use EAP TLS. So, but again, remember, if you can use MS Chat version 2 alone without using it with EAP, in which case there's no certificate involved at all. There's zero certificate involved. But if you use EAP MS Chat version 2, that's when certificates are involved. In other words, with all the authentication protocol, the only ones that involve certificates are EAP and PEAP. If you use just MS Chat version 2 by itself, it's just password, username and password. If you use just CHAP by itself, it's just username and password. If you use just PAP by itself, it's just password. But if you use them with with EAP, that's when certificate comes in. I'm not sure if that's clear. Is that clear? You just Sven, or you got a question about that?
But where can I configure EAP TLS on the VPN server?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So it's simple.
Okay.
It's this one. So let's go back to actually.
Because I haven't. Yeah, because I just see the EAP option.
Yeah. So
but where's the differentiation between EAP, TLS, and the
Good question. Look
uh,
at exactly what it says under there. When you select EAP, it says select the EAP option if you're using Network Access Protection app. It says use MPS to configure all other NAP
ah,
settings. If you're using EAP, you have to, we'll get to that in a minute. You have to use um, MPS to configure the other options.
okay.
Yeah,
So this configuration would be MSCHAP v2 with EAP.
this is basically just,
Now,
it does, so this one is not specifying anyone. This is basically specifying just EAP. So it could be MS Sharp 2, it could be TLS, it doesn't matter.
okay.
So where you configure that one, we'll get to that. So again, remember, this is where we configure the authentication that we want. If we don't want to use PAP at all, we disable PAP. If we don't want to use CHAP at all, we disable CHAP. If we don't want to use MS CHAP version 2 at all, we disable it.
So the other point is just okay. You want to use EAP,
Mhm.
but be aware you have to use network access protection to configure
You have to use
the
MPS to
options,
configure.
right? Okay.
Yeah. So it's not, so actually I think that this is like wrongly worded because you don't actually need to use network access protection, but you have to use MPS to configure the other side.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
so now, but here's the thing about VPN again. Once you install and configure VPN, yeah, it installs like a mini version of MPS on this system.
Mhm.
So even though you're not using it with a remote radio server, it uses a mini form of radius, a mini form of MPS on this system. So let's see if I click OK. So again, we've configured connection, right? We've seen where we configure authentication, right? So let's go to the next one, which is authorization, right? That'll be the next one. Again, look at this. You see there's a tab here called network policy server, right? But look at this. If I go to manage and go add roles and features and go to, you can see network policy server is not installed. Network policy and access services, which is the network policy server, is not installed. But wait a minute, we still have network policy server configuration to do here. Because once you install routing and remote access, it installs a mini version of MPS on that system. So that is where you configure your authorization. So your authorization is configured here. So let's open it up. So again, remember we're going step, so just take that layered approach. Configure your connection, your authentication, and then your authorization. So this is where like it looks a bit confusing for many people because here we have to use the policies for authorization, and the policies will go something like this. So if I go normally network policies. So because I already have this one configured before, I'll just delete this one and let's just set a new policy from scratch. So let me just make sure that I've not configured anything else that could cause issues. Any radios client. Yep, it's okay. So let's configure a new um, connection request policy. Let's even configure a new connection request policy. So let's say new policy name VPN connection. So this will answer your question now, Sven. So type of network access server, we'll say what we want is a VPN server, right? Remote access server, VPN dial-up. Next. So specify the condition. So we can specify a condition here. So let's specify a condition to say this is for VPN connections. So that's what the condition we want to specify. So in other words, this policy, again, this is like the authorization part. This policy will only apply if the connection is a VPN connection or to VPN connections. So I click VPN connection, okay. So it's like, yeah, this policy will only apply if it's a VPN connection. Next. It says authenticate request on this server. So this will start answering your question now. Authenticate request on this server, right? So that's authentication. Next. Yeah, override network policy authentication settings. You see this option?
Mm.
Yeah, there you go.
So this overrides the authentication settings on the VPN server, right?
Exactly. On that one. So
Mm.
this is where you specify which type of IP that you want. So this is where you go. You can go Microsoft PIP or you can go IP MS Chat version 2.
Mm-hmm.
So if you
Okay.
want, yeah. So again, let's go back to this one, to this diagram.
Okay.
So we said there are two types. There's IP and there's PIP. So with IP, you have two flavors. You have IP TLS, right? You have
Yeah.
IP MS Chat version 2. With PIP, you only have one flavor, and that is um, PIP TLS. That's all. So PIP TLS actually has superseded IP TLS because there's no point in using IP TLS anymore if you've got a more protected one or a more secure one that also just uses TLS. You get the point? So that's why
Mm.
here the only thing but the thing with PIP is that you cannot use PIP with MS Chat version 2. PIP has to be certificate authenticated from beginning to end. So
A
that's
question
why,
on the search.
yeah.
How do you get the client search to the client? Is it group policy?
Yeah, for sure. So
Okay.
so there are many ways that you can get certificates. So that's like a topic in 7412. So there are many ways that you can get certificates to clients. You can use group policy, Active Directory, automatic enrollment, which we did last week in the lab. If you remember, Ben. So which we did last week. So you can use Active Directory, automatic enrollment to deploy certificates to your client. And you have to select and says authenticated users can request this user certificate, they can request computer certificate, and it will automatically deploy certificates to them. Let's say you have a partner that is not in your domain. You can generate certificates for them, send it to them, ask them to install it in their certificate store, and they can use that certificate for authentication. We actually use that way I currently work because the most secure form of authentication is certificate authentication. It's well, don't let me say the most secure because you can mix it up with many other things to make it much more secure. But compared to password authentication, um, certificate authentication is more secure because someone has to breach into your CA to be able to use this. Someone has to be able to breach your CA to be able to generate certificates and use. And many companies, what they'll do is they'll have a root certification authority, right? That will issue certificate to the sub CA. They will switch off the root certification authority so nobody else can use it. The sub CA, they won't make it available by remote connection. They only make it available via the console. So if you want to make any configuration changes, you have to physically walk to the server. If you're using VMware, you have to connect to it via VMware console to be able to make any changes. So they won't make it accessible remotely at all. Many companies do that. So for you to be able to bridge that, you have to be able to get access to their VMware environment and be able to generate certificates and then use it maliciously. So it's actually much more secure form of authentication. And Microsoft strongly recommends that you don't use PAP or even MS Chat version 2, that you use certificate authentication because it's just way much more secure. So does that answer your question, Eric? So there are
Yes.
different ways. So there's not one way that you can pass a certificate. You can do it by Active Directory. You can have a web page which you can even make externally available, although that would be dangerous. But you can have a web page that users can go to and request certificate and generate certificates that way. Or you can even manually generate it and send it to the users so they can install it on their computers and then use that for authentication.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problems. Yeah, so that's why if you look at this one as Venn, the only options to find there are PIP, in which case it's talking about PIP TLS, and EPMS Chat version 2. So if you want to use all certificates, you use this one. If you want to use server certificate but client username and password, you use this one. If you want to use
Ah,
both client and server
so
certificate, you
you
use this one.
so you can't use EAP TLS anymore, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you
So
just
it's
use this one.
deprecated.
Yeah. So
Okay.
actually, if I go, let's go to this one. Let me click authentication methods. Let me click that one. And look at this. Okay. Uh, let's go to next. So this is like saying for this connection, this is what. So this is not even this is not even configuring authorization yet. This is just modifying the connection request. So say if this connection comes in, this is the authentication type that I want to use. So if it's a if it's a VPN connection, I want you to use the authentication type, and I want you to override whatever is set on the VPN server. I want you to only use this one. So that's why they told us we have to come here, and then we click next, and then finish, and then yeah, we are done. So we have VPN connection, which let's actually move it up, so it's not down. So we have this one that basically just defines that we're using PEEP for our authentication, which is PEEP TLS. So now we have to configure our authorization. So let's create a new policy for authorization. So let's say VPN connection, network server is VPN server. And the condition is if this connection, this for authorization, if this connection is a VPN connection, so this is where we specify. So Eric, this will help. So this is where we specify authorization. So in other words, even if the user is a valid user, do we want to grant access? Do we want to deny access? So this is the authorization part. So we can say, well, actually, what we want to do is we want to grant access. Access is determined by user dialing. Yeah. So if you want to, we can override whatever is in the user's policy. But yeah. So we just click next. EAP type. We'll talk more about EAP in a minute, and then go next. Um, so actually now look at this authentication method here. But again, remember this one is not forcing it to use this authentication method. This one is only saying if it meets this condition. If the condition is um, access permission, did I select? No, okay, not this one. Yeah, this one. So this one is saying if the condition is if this thing is a VPN connection. I'm not sure. I hope this one will be confusing this vein. If this connection is a VPN connection, if the authentication method is IP or MS Chat version 1 or MS Chat version 2 or this one, grant access. So this one is the authorization. Connection request policy is different from network policies. Network policies is like the authorization. This is like the connection stage. So we came to the connection stage because we wanted to change the authentication protocol that we want to use. So we're saying if a VPN connection comes in, the only authentication protocol that I want to use is PEEP. So that's the connection stage. That's different from the authorization stage, which is network policies. And the authorization stage of network policies, what we're saying is that if it's a VPN connection, that's why we are not specifying only use IP. We're saying if it's a VPN connection and the connection is using IP authentication method, authorize it, grant it access. You see that here, this one is not saying grant anything access or not.
Ah, okay.
This one,
So
yeah, carry on.
you could compare to 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 sharing and NTFS, rights. So
Yep.
like connection is like the sharing step.
Yes.
So and the network policy is some sort of the NTFS right. So this is
Yeah.
also a two-step process.
Yes.
So first of all, when you got PERP,
Yeah.
you can get in, and
Yeah.
afterwards a policy decides, okay, you are allowed to get in or you are not allowed to get in.
Yeah. So let's go here. Let's go to this server, this machine here. So this will answer your question. So we'll try to answer. I mean, we'll try to do it very quickly. For Eric, the question about how do we get the certificate to the client? So this client is not yet joined to the domain. So let me go to my domain controller here, and let's just make some quick changes to the domain controller. Again, these things are not difficult to configure. It's understanding them, understanding how they work, understanding how to trace them. That is the issue. So if I go add rows or features, so we'll just quickly configure a certificate authority quickly on this server, and it's not going to take long. So we just select Active Directory Certificate Services, so that this guy can issue certificates to servers and clients. And next, certification authority. Yep, that's the only thing we want. And install. So let's do this. So while this one is installing, let's go back to the client and join the client to the domain. So let's go properties, come on and change settings. And let's quickly join it to the domain. Okay. I think my IP configuration. Maybe I don't have an IP configuration on it. And change settings. Properties. Let's check. One into 168.70.50 and 70.50 and let's go 192.168.70.254 192.168.70.1. This is our domain controller, and it should tell us that we're connected. Yep. Oh yeah, we want you to. Okay, yeah, so let's. So you see how quick or easy that you can quickly configure these things, but it's really understanding them and knowing like the policies that you to put in place. Close, we start this one. Let's see Active Directory. Yeah, and just like that, the certificate authority is installed. So we just do the post installation configuration. Come on. Then it does the, yep, go next. Just want to configure the certificate authority because we just want it to issue certificates to. So while we're looking at this, because anyone want to quickly run us through what the rules of certificate are. If you're using certificate for authentication, what are the basic rules of what should happen if you're using certificate for authentication? So Eric, what do you think?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So if you're using certificate for authentication, it must meet some certain rules. So what are those rules that must be met if you're using certificate for
Like,
authentication? No, excuse me. Okay, yeah,
like
we got Kevin online also. So Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm lost.
Or Johnny, you can type also. So what are the rules for certificate authentication? Configuring. So yeah. So this one will help Eric in terms of how this works. So let's go back to, yeah, close. So now we've configured our Active Directory certificate authority. So the other thing that we need to do is to start issuing certificates with it. And one of the first things that we need to do is we have to configure our certificate templates. So two main certificates that we'll need the computer certificate and the user certificate. For the computer certificate, we'll have to make it so that our authenticated users can enroll the certificate. So yeah, yes, sorry. So the question, Kevin, is what are the basic, if you're using certificate for authentication, there are some basic rules that must be met. So what are those basic rules? for certificate authentication. So why Kevin is answering that? So again, remember, so we go to security first. We have to allow our users to enroll computer certificates. And then let's go to user certificates and allow authenticated users to enroll user certificate. Otherwise, they won't be able to enroll certificates. Apply. Okay. So now we've configured them to be able to enroll this. The other thing we probably want to do is group policy. Eric, what do we need to configure in group policy for certificates? Certificates. Otherwise, they won't be able to enroll the certificate. And we have to do the same for our user certificates. Now, the question I was asking before the thing got dropped off, so the users also can, enroll certificates. So the question I was asking before we dropped off is that there are certain rules if you're using certificate authentications or authentication. There are certain rules that must be followed because it's important when we're talking about EAP and PIP because it all ties a lot into radios and all that stuff. For example, if you're going to be using wireless, there's a way that you can configure your wireless, which is Microsoft's recommended way of configuring your wireless, is that your users actually won't need to enter anything for secure authentication. So by group policy, you deploy your wireless profile to your client, you configure it to use certificate authentication, you configure your wireless access point to forward to a radio server that's using certificate authentication, and when your user have the laptops that is joined to the domain, all they need to do is open the laptop. It will automatically use their certificates to connect them to the wireless access point. They don't need to enter anything, be changing anything. It will just automatically use certificates to authenticate them securely without them doing anything. So rules of certificate are simple. Number one, the name must match. Does anyone want to explain what we mean by the name must match? When we say certificate name must match. What does that mean? Sven, what do you think? What do we mean when we say the name must match?
In the certificate,
Yeah.
yeah, well, you are talking so the client tries to talk to the server, and then it uses DNS name like server1.adatum.com, and then the server sends a certificate back to the clients, and in the certificate there's one part that contains the DNS name, and this name must match.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, let's say this client goes, I want to connect to learn server1.adatum.com, and then this guy goes, and found resolves this DNS name, and then it goes to this server here. And then this server here has a certificate. But in the name section of the certificate, or let's say no, the name of this server is learn server1.adatum.com. So that's the name of this server, and that's the name that is on the certificate that was issued to it. But let's say this guy, because sometimes you don't want to use names like this, you want to use names that are easy for user. This guy connects to vpn.adatum.com. Now, when this guy connects, it's going to tell this guy, hey, I need your certificate. Send me your certificate. That's the first thing the client will say to the server. So the server will reply with the certificate. And then the client is like, hold on, I'm connecting to vpn.adatum.com. The name on your certificate is showing learnserver1.adatum.com. That's where you get the warning from that says you're connecting to a server that may be an impersonation. Have you ever seen that warning before? Because the server's name, the name you're using to connect to the server is something else. The name in the certificate is something else. So it's like, hold on, are you trying to impersonate someone? That's where you get the warning. It's like, hey, I'm not sure it's safe for you to proceed because it's like you go to a passport office and it's like, hey, can I see your passport? Like, yeah, that's the passport. And like, what's your name? My name is Eric. Hold on, the name here says Richard. What's going on? So that's kind of like the way it works. So the names must match. So if we're going to be using a name, we have to make sure that we issue that name on our certificate. One thing that people can do is they use something called wildcard certificate, where they can just issue a certificate for star.adatum.com. In other words, it's going to be like, yeah, I'll take, if it's .adatum.com, I'm okay with it. The other thing is that the purpose, this is important, the purpose must be correct. In other words, now we said when you're using PIP, the server will authenticate the client with the client certificate. The client will authenticate the server with the server certificate. The purpose on the server certificate must 100% must say server authentication. If the purpose, so actually if you bring up any computer and look for any certificate, and I go MMC and look for any certificate, you see that the purposes are in there. So if I go just bring up computer certificates, let's just bring computer certificate and go open this trusted root certificate. Yeah, let's just look for any certificate. Details. Um, let's see. Hmm, let's see. In general, is it under details? Where do you get the? Ah, okay, yeah. Here we go. It's called the EKU, Enhanced Key Usage. This is what we're using this key for. Server authentication, code signing, client authentication, secure email. If the server is replying to the client with a certificate that doesn't have server authentication, the client will be like, I can't accept it. The certificate purpose must match. This is especially important if you're using certification authorities and they are not Windows. Because Microsoft Computer Certificate, if I go to the domain controller, Microsoft Computer Certificate, by default, their purpose includes client authentication, server authentication by default. But some third-party CA, maybe they're issuing, maybe you're using like a kind of like a Linux CA, but the key usage for the server, it's not saying server authentication. You must add it, otherwise it's not going to work. The purpose must be the same. So you must actually go under the certificate template and add a new, you have to add a new usage for it. Or what you can do is you can clone it. You can duplicate template and call it something else. Copy of computer. Yeah, let's go copy of computer, and then go to um, extensions and key usage, and then you have to edit this and basically add a new key usage to it. So in other words, the names must match, the purpose must match. So, but with Microsoft, you don't need to worry about that because by default, the names and the certificate, the purpose is for computer certificate. It's not only for computer authentication, but for server authentication. So you can issue the same certificate to computers and servers. So I'm not sure, is that clear? Was there any question regarding that?
Yeah, it's clear.
So let's go ahead to administrator. Come on. Just very little time. So, okay, so we got the client, we got domain controller. Then we have to go to group policy. And the reason why we have to go to group policy is we have to enable the certificate to, you have to enable the client to be able to enroll the certificate. So let's just edit the default domain policy, not to waste time. And policies, come on. The Windows settings or administrative templates, one of them has the option for public key infrastructure security settings. Yep, here we go. Public key policies. So under public key policies, you see this option here, certificate services client, auto enrollment. So we have to enable it. So this will allow, clients to be able to automatically enroll certificates. You don't have to be issuing it to them, or they don't have to be requesting it. So you can even actually automatically manage them. So if the certificate are about to expire, it's going to renew them. If the certificate are pending, it's going to update them. If they are revoked, it's going to remove them, and stuff like that. So we can select all those options. So certificate enrollment policy, Active Directory enrollment. Yep. And then go OK. So then if we go to our client 2 guy again, oh, sorry, not client 2, client 1 guy, and here we go again. The purple and blue thing, come on. Yeah, so yeah, we'll come back to that one. So why that one is doing, let's go to our VPN server and let's actually go request a certificate because our VPN server has to authenticate itself to the client if we're using PEEP. So what we have to do is go to um, get a certificate for our client, our guy. So in its computer store, it must have a certificate that it uses for server authentication. That's the key. Computer certificate is what we're interested in, and the local computer is what we're interested in. So let's just request a certificate for this guy. Normally we don't have to request it because we have Active Directory enrollment enabled, but it may take a while to be enrolled, so we just go request it manually. So request new certificate. So you can see that's the policy that we just enabled now, Active Directory enrollment policy, and it's going to tell us the certificate we can enroll. So based on the security settings, we should be able to enroll at least user and computer certificates. So here we go. Got computer certificates to enroll. So now this server has or should have a certificate in a few minutes. Should have a certificate that we can use to authenticate the server, and we'll do the same for the client. It's purple now, still green. Yeah, okay, yep, here we go. So this guy has a certificate, and you can see the certificate now. So let's go, certificate issued to this name. In other words, when our client is connecting to this guy, we must make sure that the name that our client is connecting to is this one. The client must not try to connect to, we must not have a fancy DNS name on the internet DNS that the client is trying to connect to. It must be connecting to this particular name, otherwise it's not going to work. And we cannot try to connect using an IP address because this certificate is not issued to an IP address. It's issued to learnserver1.adatum.com, and that's what it wants. And then if you go under details and go under, so you may say, what if in the case I have a different name for internal DNS, a different name for external DNS? Then there's some different certificates that they have subject alternative names. This one, where you can actually have multiple names for one certificate. So in that case, you can issue it for Launch Server 1. Maybe the second name will be your external DNS name, maybe vpn.adatum.com, but the name must be here. Then the number 2 thing is the key usage. No, not key usage, enhanced key usage, which is EKU. Yeah, server authentication must be there. So we're good. And whoa, don't you love this?
Almost ready.
So what we want to do is just enroll the certificate on the client now, and then come on. So if everything works normally the way it should work, we should be able to go to our client and connect to the VPN server and not be prompted for anything. It will basically just connect. So the user can just go right click, connect to VPN server, and just go boom, it's connected. It's not asking for username or password or anything. It's
Okay.
using PEEP. Both of them are using certificates to authenticate one another. But again, it's almost ready. I've enabled this one, show first sign-in animation.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just disabled it now. So it was not configured before. So that's the option to disable this silly blue, yellow stuff.
Yeah.
So
So the client is now connected to the internal network, or is the client connected to the internet?
internal network. So what we want to do is we want to get a certificate for him first. So
Ah,
there are two
okay.
ways. It's that if this guy is connected to the internal network, we get the certificate for him this way when it's connected to the internal network. Or the other
Mm-hmm.
thing is we can send it to him remotely. So we
Mm-hmm.
can actually go generate it for him. And when we generate it for him and then send it to him.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, yeah, let's go add the remote snapping. And then we've got just few minutes, then we finish for today. Next, local computer. Okay, certificate. Yep, so it's got nothing in the personal certificate. And then we go request new certificate. So we just get a new certificate from the server. So that will be the certificate that the client will use for authentication. Mm, but then the other thing, here's the other thing though. Let me go back to, so this is long client one. Ah, okay, it makes sense. Because I was thinking I moved a client to the internet. So it's long clients two that I moved to the internet, so not long clients one. So after that,
Yeah.
we'll remove this one from the internal network, move it to the
Mm.
internet,
Yeah.
and then try to connect this method. So, and then
Mm.
we'll see what happens. So if we go computer certificate, enrolled computer certificate. But it's not just enough to enroll a computer certificate. One other thing that must be done is that the root certificate must be in the trusted root certificate store.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for both client and
But
server.
this should happen through the default domain policy, right? Because your CA is
Yes,
domain integrated, right?
yes, should.
Mm.
So that should happen automatically. So come on. So once this one enrolls, so this one is different from SSTP. So this is like if I go back to, because SSTP is connection. Yep, we've got that. Trusted root certificate. So it's not yet there, but yeah, because I can see the certificate here. So if I click on that, come on, come on, come on. What that's doing? Let's check out the server and let's say the server certificate. Certification part, server. Yeah, so server already has that certificate.
Mm.
So let's,
Okay.
yeah,
And in the personal store, that's no, okay, right.
yeah, so it's
Okay.
going to
So
be
you got
inside.
your client certificate.
Yeah,
Okay.
but the server certificate is in inside
Yeah.
it. It says it's not
Yeah.
trusted because it's not a trusted root certificate authority.
Okay.
So what we need
Perhaps
to
you
do
have to
is,
do an GP update also.
yeah, exactly. So we need to just quickly do group policy updates. GP update slash fast, not dot
Well,
fast,
hmm.
slash, yeah, here we go.
May the force be with you.
Let's go GP update. Yeah, computer policy, good one. So let's refresh this guy and let's check. Yep,
Hmm.
it's got it now.
Yeah.
So good
Hmm.
one. So what we can do is now we're done. We'll take this guy out from this network. But before we do that, let's take him out. Let's go delete. But then we'll go to him, long client one, and then we have to configure. So what we'll do is I have two network adapters on this one for this reason. So we'll disable this network adapter, the internal one, and then the external one, um, disable. And then the external one, I just have to check the IP address.
Hmm.
Is so that's 98.1.1. Let me see what I've got for this one. 98.1.1.254. So let's say 98.1.1.7. 255.255.255.0, 98.1.1.254, and then we'll leave DNS server alone. But then the issue that we have to deal with this one is the host file. So
Okay.
cd so that it will know where to direct launch server
Mm.
1.com to.
Yeah, because when you talk to the VPN server with an IP address, we will get an issue with non-matching names, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Mm.
system 32 drivers etc noteband hosts. Yep, and then let's just go 98 dot. What's the IP address of the interface? It's not 89. Now use 98. So let's go back to launch server 2. Hold on now. I think I generated certificate for the wrong server. So that's good that I detected that. Because yeah, it's launch server 1 that we want to generate certificate for, not launch server 2.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to watch the recording later. I just got a call, so I gotta get out.
Ah, no, okay, no problems, man. No problems.
Good seeing
Okay.
y'all. Thanks
Yeah.
for hosting.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
just finish just this one. We won't do we won't do anything more after this one. Because we're running over now. And it's time that we'll move on to another topic even. So let's go personal certificates. Oh, okay, it got it already by group policy. Okay, it doesn't have the trusted routes. So GP update /force and just make sure that it has the certificate. Mm, yeah, but then the IP address is the other thing I'm looking for. Refresh trusted routes. Yep, we have it now. And then we have the server certificate now too. Okay, so let's see what IP address does the internet use. 98.1.1.2.
Mm.
So that's what we'll configure on this guy. 98.1.1.2, and that's long server2.com, and then we'll save it. So what we'll now do is we'll connect this guy to the internet interface E1. Doesn't matter. Yep. And then let's go back to him. Yeah, okay. So what I want to make sure is that if I do ping 98.1.1.7, which is its own address.
Do you have to do an NS lookup or?
Yeah, for
Oh no, you have to do an ping to the network address,
yeah, ping long
to the DNS name. Yeah.
yeah, then othertone.com. Yep, so that's good. So it's resolving to that. So ping
Okay.
is blocked, so that's
But
why.
it. Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's why it's like ping is blocked on the DNS server. So what we need to do
Yeah.
is configure a new connection. And again, the settings must be the same on the client and on the server. So on the client, we must configure the same. So if we do use my internet connection, oh, no, no, now, later. Okay, so we'll say internet address. So we say long server2.adatum.com. Oh, sorry. Internet address, destination name, VPN connection. Let's remove this. Let's create it. So then we edit the settings and make sure that we configure this. So what would usually happen is that on a network, you configure this side by group policy. So
Hmm.
you deploy the VPN connections or the wireless connections even. So you deploy your wireless connections to the PCs by group policy or to the users, and you have all the settings configured from group policy. So the user don't have to come here. So what I can do, if I go under properties and go under security, type of VPN. So we don't mind the connection type, negotiate it with the server. But then the authentication, we want to use IP. And then what we can say is use Microsoft PIP, this one.
PIP.
Yeah. And then we go under property. So all these parts, we'll be doing it by group policy. Verify the server's identity by validating the certificate. Connects to these servers. So all these ones, again, remember, we'll be doing it by group policy .adatum.com. So that's the certificate we want to validate. That's the trusted root certificate authority that issued it. Tell user if the server root certificate isn't specified. Yeah, so that's okay. So
Okay. And
select
there's the
authentication method.
authentication method again.
Yeah.
Is it the same?
So so this is again, remember, is mutual authentication. Server authentication, client authentication. So we selected it. It's now saying, hey, how do you want? So this is server validating itself. But what about the client? Do you want the client to use? So you're like, yeah. So we're like, okay, no, we want you to use certificates and configure. And then we go, let's see, when connecting, use a certificate on this computer. Certificate issuer is adatum.com. So we're saying use a certificate on this computer when connecting, and the server. So this is from the client side to the server side. And again, remember this one, you just deploy this by group policy to your client. So don't prompt user to authorize new server software certification authority. Okay. So we're validating the server. So we're saying to this client, use a certificate on this computer. Certificate we want you to use should be issued by this year. And so it's going to look in the certificate store, in the computer certificate store for a certificate issued by that year. So this is the same way that we're going to do if you're configuring our wireless connection. So we deploy this by group policy. We set up everything by certificate. So the user can just go, open the computer, it's going to take the certificate and connect. So we go, okay, so let's try that now and go VPN connection, connect. No, there was an unknown error. So let's go back again. So let's go properties. Let's just check that again. Automatic, doesn't matter. PIP is what we want to do.
This is the authentication which uses the client for authenticating to the server.
Yeah.
And the other, this select authentication method is how the server authenticates the client.
Yeah.
Okay.
So but then let's see, something here isn't right. It says launch server2.atom.com, configure launch server2.atom.com. Okay. So what's like so it's having an issue. So we said use PIP. Could it be connection type? I'm thinking. Did you see the other message? Something about certificate store. Again, let's go back to
what about the revocation? Perhaps there's some issue with the revocation.
Yeah, so maybe it's trying to check that, which we have to disable by registry edit. That's right. That's absolutely right. So we have to go to the client And let me look for that registry. Is the HK local machine? Let me look for it. I think,
Yeah.
um, I think I have it on a browser bookmark somewhere. Revo. Okay, yeah, I think I found it. Where's the? Yeah, I think I found it. Okay. So registry edit, HK local machine, system, current control set, services, service parameters, new D word, no search, verification, check, and then we set the value to 1. Let's try that. So something else. If I go back to the server and just have a quick look in the
Good.
event log.
We'll be back in a second.
Yeah, no problem. I'm thinking,
What about the server certificate of London Serve 2? Because you configured the rule for getting the certificates, the auto enrollment, but does London Serve 2 already got his
yeah,
certificate?
yeah, it does.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, let me look at, let's see. So if you look at this, the connection request policy used for authentication is corrupted. Wow. Did you see?
Wow. Okay.
That will explain what's going on. Has been repaired. Okay.
Okay.
What's what happened? That's the first time I'm seeing that.
If it would be always so easy.
Okay, it's corrupted. Yeah. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go to our client. Okay, not that one.
Perhaps we can reboot the client and reboot the server
The
again.
server. I mean, let me see, because let's see. We've got the client. Let's start from the connection.
Yeah.
So we have the connection. Yeah, so we can use any one of them. So that's good. Okay. The authentication properties. So we're saying, hey, talk to Windows. The authentication method we want is this. Let's say we're not using MS Chat version 2 at all. Okay, and apply. So we're not using MS Chat version 2 at all. And then we have to go to NPS. and check connection policy. So I moved this one up. This one should not be conditions. So VPN server. So actually, I'll just disable this one because this is the one that I configured. Okay, so let's go back. I think it's something to do with if I go back to the server, configure this one, policy enable, the condition, it's a VPN connection, authentication method is PIP.
What about the time? Perhaps there's a time issue.
Which one is that? Yeah, the time somewhere.
The server got okay. What's the time and date of the client?
Date of the client. Oh, okay, you
Yeah,
mean that? Okay.
yeah,
I think this should be similar.
should be similar.
Yeah, the same time.
Okay, okay, but
Yeah,
it's also wrong, but okay.
yeah.
But it's the same. Yeah, it's okay.
Server 2. What about network policies? VPN connection. We said is grant access. Condition is a VPN server. Mm, I'm thinking there should be no need to add. There really should be there's no need to add because it's on the same server. So there's no need to add a radius client there. Let's call it but this is like when we're using radius, but we're not using radius. Okay, let me go back to event viewer. I wanted to see that error message. It gave an error message. So it says 1 mini port Ike version 2. So does that mean it's trying to use Ike version 2? So let me just set this to say, hey, use PPTP. Properties. This heap. Talking peep on server 2. So if I go back to on server 2, what do you think? What do you think would be an issue here? Login, log all events.
Yeah.
Mm,
What's the event log of the client saying?
of the client. Let's see. Respond. Why it's responding? Let's go back to this guy and see. Store filled with error.
Okay, but this has something to do with an Windows Store application.
Yeah.
Yes,
Would
this
it be
is
something
also
to do with
okay.
licensing?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is because you use an trial version.
But you should not like.
Uh,
I don't think it should have expired. Should it?
Perhaps it's not the Windows is not activated or so.
Uh,
Not activated. Yeah.
but that shouldn't matter. Should it matter?
Hmm.
Let me restart this machine, like you
Yeah.
said. Start down slash. Um, yeah. So let's restart this machine. So that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right. Like certificate store. Yeah, because it the error message that it gave before it actually started doing that is that it has to do with something with certificate store. Because it said
Hmm.
something about certificate store.
Hmm.
So yeah, good one. It's not actually like straightforward, so that's good.
Yeah. Reboot is always a good idea.
It is. And then this guy is he got anything yet?
Mhm. What will be the topic of next week?
Oh, let me see. That's true. Let's see.
Did
Um,
we got managed service accounts already?
no, not
And
yet.
uh,
Not yet.
and Kerberos delegation would also be a nice topic.
Yeah. Oh, next week will be. Yeah, next week will be Kerberos authentication. So
Ah, okay, okay.
configures. Okay, let me actually bring up the topic. 7411 born to learn 7411, and then let's bring up the topic for next week, which
Hmm.
is configure service authentication. And so let's say configure service. So I think that involves managed services.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
So
it involves managed service account and
managed
looking for
service accounts
Kerberos.
and group. Okay, so I think it's getting easier next week. It's more straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
Ah, but
configure.
perhaps you can generate the keys for the domain in advance because otherwise you have to wait for 10
For that,
hours.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's true. It's a good idea. I should actually like get all the labs ready
yeah,
before we actually
yeah.
start. So let's see this one. It says, yeah, manage service account, creating service account, group manage service account. um, FISMO, read-only, virtualization, safe, domain controller cloning,
Okay.
yeah, fine-grained password policies and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's do
Also,
this
this is
one and see. So I think, yeah, you're right. Something is wrong with this guy's certificate store
hmm.
because it says reading certificate store and then it came up with an error message. So if I go event viewer, yeah, something to do with this guy's certificate store. Its certificate store is messed up somewhere. Come on, it's in the we go to learn client too. Let's see F5. So let's connect to that again.
Okay, wait a second. What's the error code again?
Hmm. Oh, okay, you mean the
Um,
error code? Okay, yeah, let me go back to
yeah,
that.
yeah. Okay, 80420. Okay.
Yeah, what that one is doing. Let's go to.
Okay, there's a knowledge base article.
What does the article say?
Okay. If there are no user certificates on the computer, you may receive the
Oh,
following error message.
that is true. That is actually my mist. My, how could I forget that? Okay, so it's actually good for our lesson. It's good for our
So,
lesson. You know what?
mutual authentication,
Yeah,
right?
it's not only that, but because the way PEEP authentication works, because I actually read this, and the way PEEP authentication works, it doesn't only use computer certificate, it uses both computer and client certificate and user certificate. So
So
actually,
you have to copy the certificate from the
no,
computer store into the.
you have to generate a user certificate. So it authenticates the
Okay.
computer. So it actually it's not known as computer authentication or user authentication. It's known as client authentication. So actually, let me bring up this table. If I can bring up this table here, copy. Oh, but that is actually a good lesson for us, right? It's actually a good lesson for us. Look at this. Okay, so well, is this messed? I think this messed up. Uh, Sedike. Okay, I think this one is really messed up. But the point. Okay, no. I know what to do now. I have another idea. So let me just do a screenshot rather than this one. and then let's do print screen, and then go copy. So this from the note I made when I was reading this last week. Yeah, you can see, right? So if you go
Mm.
for IP or PIP TLS, these are the requirements. CA certificate in the trusted root store, yes, yes. Client computer certificate in the store, um, it says yes. Client certificate are required unless user certificates are distributed on smart card. Um, no user authentication is performed in the certificate store of the client. So actually, like this one doesn't even I didn't even mention like this one, but it's not. You see, it says client. Okay, it says client computer certificate in the certificate store of the client. Server certificates in the certificate store of the MPS server. User certificates on a smart card. But it actually both. I read somewhere that it's actually both computer and user certificates that's used for authentication. So that's why it says the CA certificate and the trusted root certification authorities, it must be in the certificate store for both the local computer and the current user
Mm.
because it uses. So that's my own bad. So yeah, actually we can use this to practice the other method that we talked about. So how do I generate a certificate for this user? This user is remote, right? I want to
Mm.
generate a user certificate for him. How do I generate a user certificate for him?
Mm. Well, you have to go to the CA.
Yeah, so if I go to the CA, which is our domain controller, so that's actually like a good. I mean, it's good that you looked that up, but because I was confused, because I'm trying to think why in the world, because connection is okay, authentication settings is okay, why in the world is it not working? So okay, let's go back to our CA, and then we want to generate a certificate for the user. How do we generate a certificate for the user?
Submit new request.
Okay, so let's go submit new request. And what's the request
Um,
to submit?
no. Uh, I think you have to go to the web page, right?
There's another way that we can use. So
Okay.
let's go to certificate templates. Um, come on, certificate template. We don't have enough time to. Now we have the user certificates. Okay, let's manage certificate templates. And then we have the user certificates. Where's the user certificate? Yeah. So request handling. There's another method to use. So we say that enroll. Um, so let's go to actually let's go to because there's a way that you can set to enroll on behalf of someone.
Mm.
So you can actually set um, a way to enroll a certificate in MMC on behalf of a user. So if I go to launch server, this one too will be good. Launch server one or the DC anyone. Come on. So I can enroll. Come on. So what I can do is I can go to add remove snapping, certificate, user account. Okay. So if I go to certificate here, I can go to all task, advanced operation. I can enroll on behalf of.
Mm.
So that saves you from Active Directory. So what I can do is, I'll download a separate certificate I can use for enrollment. Um, I'll need to configure that because I'll need another certificate I can use for enrollment. And then certificate I can use for enrollment, I can enroll for another user.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the certificate I can use for enrollment, if I go to under manage here again, um, enrollment agent, yeah. So I'll
Okay.
need to configure this and say if I go to an enrollment agent, let's go to security, authenticated users enroll, apply, okay, back to MMC, cancel this, um, go, so request a new certificate. So this should allow me to get a certificate I can use for enrollment. You get the point? So first of all, yeah, let's see, administrator.
User, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's user, but let's see. Yeah, no, but that's just for normal user one. So if I go administrator issued by Adatum to this one. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can use this for enrollment. No, so I don't think maybe the policy has not applied. So I should be able to now generate a certificate. So that certificate will be the one that I'll use for enrollment. So let me close this. Go to MMC, add or remove snapping, certificates, my user account. Okay, so let's go to certificate, request new certificate. So I need a certificate I can use to enroll. Mm, so authenticated users can. Mm, okay. A valid certification authority configured to issue certificate based on this template cannot be located, or the CA does not support this operation, or the CA is not trusted. So that's why.
The CA is not trusted.
He said a valid certification authority configured to issue certificate based on this template cannot be located.
Oh.
So let me see the one that I just, yeah, this one. So it says unavailable. So I'm not sure why it's saying unavailable. Okay, let's see. Let me go back to this guy and let's go to roles or features. Next, next. Let me see one of the roles. Yeah, that's why.
Oh.
I think we'll need um, Mm, yeah, we'll look into that one and we'll discuss that one some more. But yeah, so the way it should work is that we um, enable the user to be able to get a certificate to use for enrollment. They generate a certificate to use for enrollment, and then they can enroll on behalf of a user here. But normally we'll limit this to Active Directory. Mm, yeah, I mean, we'll look at this one some more. But you get the point. But then the other thing that we can do is that because this is the same administrator account, right? So we can simply just export it.
Mm.
So we can export this thing because it's for the same user. The user on the other side is also administrator. We export
Mm.
the private key too, which we can
Yeah.
disable by group policy. Next, and just give it the password to encrypt the private key. So we say, and we go next, file name, admin, browse. Let's save it on desktop. Finish. And then we'll just send it to the other guy. So one way that we can use to send it to him is thank God for not that one. That's not the way. One way we can use is VirtualBox allows us to use share folders.
Uh,
So we can just go uh, save it on the download folder. Okay, okay, and then go under the network, and then we should see the network, VirtualBox, downloads. Yep, and then let's copy the certificate from the desktop to the download folder. And then we just go send it to the other guy, whether by email or something. But this time, this time we use VirtualBox. So if you go to Launch Client 1, um, so let's get to the same, let's go to settings, network, shared folder. Let's add the download folder here also. And okay, okay. Mm, admin, here we go. Let's install the certificate. Store location, current user, password. Yeah, so let's go check MMC. Let's see the certificate store now. The user certificate store. Yep, got that. And then we've got, yeah, here we go. So let's
Okay.
try that one more time.
Mm.
There we go. That's better. And if everything should go on right. Now you see, we're not asked
Okay.
to enter username.
When you